Good morning. The secret of success is seeing your work primarily as a service to others and not as a means of personal gain.
Good morning, good evening, everyone. It is a blessing and a joy to be sharing this morning with Nayaswamis Jyotish and Nayaswami Devi live from the US. I am Pranita.
And I am Nitendra.
And we are both based in Ananda in Gurgaon.
The topic of today's satsang is spirituality in daily life. Daily life in isolation is definitely bothersome, isn't it? Managing work, family, time, finances, and spirituality is in some sense central to all of us, and it will remain central until we all are planning to move to the Himalayas very soon. So why not learn how to manage our daily life while wanting to grow spiritually? And are we not blessed to have the opportunity to learn from Jyotish and Devi, who epitomize spirituality in daily living? While Jyotish and Devi do not need an introduction to any of us, but in the context of this topic, they have a family life where they are loving parents and they are loving grandparents. They have a work life which involves leading a worldwide organization in Ananda, which means meetings, making practical decisions, coordination, emails, finances, traveling across the globe, managing time zones as they are doing right now while being in the evening, and an endless list of activities. We all wait for their vlogs, the weekly vlogs. We are inspired by the paintings by Jyotish, the books. Now, is that not a very busy daily life? But with over 50 years, they have been focusing on one thing: to spread the teachings and the love and peace of our Master Yoganandaji, keeping spirituality central to everything. Jyotishji, in fact, has been with Swamiji even before Ananda formally started, and Jyotishji and Deviji have been with Swamiji together building Ananda as a worldwide community, and more importantly, as they come and visit us to India today, they have actually been central to building Ananda India, which means we are blessed to have them who not only understand what daily living means, but they also understand the context in which we in India live and work in our daily lives. And they have been practicing spirituality in daily living at the highest level. So welcome Jyotishi and Deviji. We would now request you to start with a prayer.
I'll just lead us in a prayer that we don't need to try to do it responsively. It's hard at long distance. So, Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, great masters of self-realization, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Guru, Paramahansa Yoganandaji, saints of all religions, we humbly bow to you all. Beloved Lord, thou art in all things, thou art in all activities. Help us to see behind the surface to thy hidden presence that is hiding just behind the beautiful nature, the trees, the flowers, hiding just behind the faces of all the people and all things in this world. Help us become aware and ever more attuned to thy presence. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Welcome once again, everybody. For those of us who have just joined, today's satsang topic is spirituality in daily life. We will get more insights from Jyotish ji and Devi ji during this satsang, and Nitendra and I will be asking and voicing out the questions that some of the Guru Bhais have sent us. So welcome once again. We'll perhaps start with the first question, Nitendra.
Thank you, Pranita. The first question is, I can't wait to retire from work and then seek a spiritual life. We hear a lot from a number of people, but we see that both of you live deeply spiritual lives and at the same time do your duties towards family and Ananda Sangha. What would your advice be to people who are wanting to retire to start their spiritual lives? How are you able to balance in your own lives?
Well, I too would like to retire. Not really. You know, we have, to a certain extent, a mistaken thought that practical life and spiritual life are separated. Obviously, we can concentrate more deeply on, one might say, a spiritual element when we're meditating than we can when we're in the midst of a sales meeting or whatever it is our daily job is involved in. But to a certain extent, God is equally present everywhere. And so it isn't so much the environment that prevents us from seeing God, is that the environment engages our minds in such a way that we forget to see the presence of God. And if we think, oh, I have to wait until I retire before I can turn my mind toward God, well, then nobody under the age of 65 would ever meditate. And then by the time you got to age 65, if you didn't have any habit of meditation, it's unlikely that you'd pick it up. So we have to balance both of those together. We have to learn to be involved in a daily life, in a practical life, and doing our jobs, our work as well as possible. But we also need to make time, find time for concentration, especially meditation. And Master said the ideal for this would be to meditate deeply in the morning, to do our work, trying to remember God as often as we can while we're doing our work, and then to come back to our homes and meditate again in the evening. So he too recognized that there was a necessity to balance these two.
And first of all, I want to, before I respond to that question, I wanted to thank you both for inviting us to be with you, and thank you for the beautiful introduction. You know, one of the things we learned from Swami Kriyananda, our lifelong teacher, was just to be natural in your life, in your spirituality, and not to kind of think you have to put your life in some kind of wrap it up in cellophane to be spiritual, but just to live it, but with the thought of God. But I wanted to also add this important thought. One of the things that makes it easy, we are all given, disciples of Master, are given a special dispensation because our line of gurus came, that was part of their purpose. Those, if new people are watching who haven't read Autobiography of a Yogi, you know, Lahiri Mahashaya, who brought Kriya Yoga to the world from the secrecy of the Himalayan yogis. Who was he? He was a householder. He was an accountant. He had children. And it was for that purpose that his guru, Babaji, said, no, you must go back to the world and show men and women that the spiritual life and practical dharmic living are not antithetical. And so we have to understand, by our gurus give us a dispensation to do this. And the more you tune into your guru, to Yoganandaji and Lahiri, Sri Yukteswar Babaji, Krishna, the more you understand how to do it. So I don't feel like Jyotish and I have done anything extraordinary at all. We have just loved our guru, and he has shown us how to bring God in everywhere and to live with joy. So I want people to understand that if you tune into the guru, he will show you, because that was their mission in this time, was to bring spirituality out of the high Himalayas into Gurgaon and Chennai and Mumbai and Los Angeles and everywhere.
Thank you so much, Jyotishi and Deviji.
Such a beautiful thought that God lives everywhere. And if we really imbibe this, it's such a beautiful life that we are all living. The
It
next
is.
question, thank you. The next question that we have here is that Master said environment is stronger than willpower. And how can we make sure that in the environment in our daily lives, whether it is work life or others, that environment doesn't dampen our spirits? And particularly, have there been any instances during your travels across the world where that you felt that the environment really wasn't that positive or spiritual? And how did you overcome that to stay in tune?
Well, that's a very good question, because in fact, environment, Master's statement sounds like it's a either or. Environment is stronger than willpower. But in other statements, he also said, if your willpower is strong, it does not matter what kind of environment you're in or what kind of astrological chart you have, so that he was saying essentially that ultimately your willpower is the most powerful. But environment is a very, very strong influence. And until you're very centered, environment affects you. In fact, Master wrote to one of his first disciples in America. He said, I come home from the talks I give and the meetings I have with people, and my hair is saturated with the smell of smoke, because in those days, most people, adults in America, smoked, and many of them smoked cigars, men. And so that heavy smoke odor saturated Master's clothes and hair. And he said, it used to bother me. And then I realized that Divine Mother was equally in the smoke as in my hair. And after that, the smoke never bothered me. But that story is very instructive, because if we allow our minds to think that the environment is antithetical to our spirituality, then of course it will be a self-fulfilling thought. So what we need to do is we need to try to see all environments as containing God. Now, it's easier to do in some environments. And so in a work environment where you have very little control over the space or the people or the interactions, it's harder to do that. So what can we control? We can control the environment in our cars if we're commuting to work, so that we can play the tapes, Master's voice, or spiritual music, or Swami's talks. We can fill our car as a satsang. When we're at home, we can control that environment. We can make it beautiful and simple and the colors uplifting. So that environment which we can control, we should try to uplift. That which we can partially control, as in a car, we should try to have filled with as much spirituality as possible. And that which we have almost no control over, we should see behind the surface of it, that even though the surface is rather unpleasant, God is hiding in this. That will at least keep us centered.
Perhaps one of the most difficult environments we've ever been in is when we were visiting a friend of ours who is in maximum security prison. This is a man who was convicted unjustly of a crime he didn't commit, and he's been in prison for 40 years now, I think. And he's a wonderful man. He was convicted when he was like 18 of a murder that he did not commit. And he reached out to Ananda, and we sent him autobiography. And so we began visiting him in prison. And the first time I went, I was a little frightened, I did, because it was maximum security. It isn't just petty crimes. So these are murderers. But as we sat in the waiting room, and I was just praying, surround us in light, I looked at the other people, and my heart just filled with compassion, because there were mothers visiting and fathers visiting their sons. There were wives and children visiting their husbands and fathers. And all I felt, honestly, was love. I just thought, it doesn't matter. If you love someone, that love, nothing changes that. And then we went in and we met our friend. He wanted a spiritual name, so we gave him the name Jairam. He's a wonderful soul. And Jyotish even went later on, after we had met him, he initiated him into Kriya in prison. They gave him it was essentially a little closet that they could go into in the meeting area, and Jyotish, like a broom closet, and Jyotish gave him Kriya in there. But you could think that, I don't think most of us will be in an environment like that, but Jairam, for 40 years, he's been in a cell 6 feet by 9 feet. With bunk, he has a cellmate. He meditates every day, morning and evening. He does his kriyas, reads autobiography. He studied law. He became a lawyer. He's helped a lot of other people get out of prison, but he can't get out himself. We've been working on it, and we hope
to change that.
But the point being, in the middle of that difficult environment, if you're in a very toxic workspace, or some people have very disharmonious families that they live with in home, if you can try to find a way to stay centered in an uplifted way, in your heart, in your compassion, in your praying for the other people. And if you can do that, every place is beautiful. When we finally went into the holding area where the the prisoners were coming out, and some of those guys were really scary looking. But I saw the children that were going up to them, and that was their father. And I just thought, don't judge these people. You don't know what their life has been. And so wherever you are, to try to step back from your own self and just think about bringing love and compassion and sharing energy with the people, even if it's a grouchy grandmother that lives with you or a rebellious teenager. Just always find that center where you can love them.
Just a final thought. Master's second most advanced disciple, he said, a man named Oliver Black. I met him along with Swamiji. Swamiji knew him, of course. He said that he surrounded himself in a bubble of joy, and he never, ever let anything permeate that bubble. And so sometimes we can't control the environment, but we can put an aura, a force field around us that is one of our choosing.
And of course, in autobiography, Ananda Ma talks about her portable paradise. So that's a lovely image. You know, wherever you go, you carry your paradise with you. So I think a lot of it is just staying centered in yourself and not letting whatever it happens. You know, if you have colleagues that are trying to undermine you, or, you know, whatever people do, you know, to try to get ahead or whatever, you just stay centered and have faith that God will take care of you. He will protect you.
Thank you so much, Jyotish and Devi, especially for the practical tips and inspiring story about, in some sense, the extreme of what the environment can be, but how we can remain centered. Thank you so much. We will go to the family part of things as well, but before that, there's one more question on the work side of things, which is, how do we make sure that we do not use spirituality as a means to shun responsibility and hard work in our daily outward lives? Would you have some examples for us again on your own life where you had to deal with difficult assignments, but still you would keep centered?
Yes, that's a very perceptive question, because many people hide behind spirituality. They, which of course is not deep spirituality, but it's superficial spirituality, and they use that as a defense mechanism, one might say, to avoid dealing with issues that they need to deal with. We fortunately had such a wonderful example in Swami Kriyananda. He was very practical, deeply, deeply spiritual, but he didn't wear his spirituality like an outfit, you know. He just was very natural, but his mind was always uplifted. So it wasn't anything in his, I don't know, the clothes he wore. He wore just regular clothes, except when he was lecturing, by and large. And it wasn't anything outside or superficial. But as soon as one came into his aura, you felt his mind was uplifted. He always saw the bright side, the positive, the solution oriented side of things. But in terms of work, he was very practical and extremely hardworking. He worked 12, 14 hours a day his whole life, and not just worked. He, you know, if you're going to produce 150 books in your life, as well as lecture, you know, multiple thousands of times and create communities, you'd better be efficient in your work habits. And he was extremely efficient because he concentrated his whole energies on whatever he was doing at that moment, and then he moved on to the next thing. But he never hid behind, oh, I can't do that, I can't take that on because I'm too spiritual. In fact, he didn't like to deal with finances, but he said God made him deal with finances. And it was one of the best things that God did to him, because he knew that then he needed to deal with that.
Again, we can go back to the models of our gurus, because if you look at what Yogananda did when he came to the West in 1920, came to America and revolutionized the whole science and art of meditation, yoga, but the output of lectures and travel and writing, and it really is phenomenal. I mean, every day of every year, he was doing something. He said sometimes he would, he would have a talk in the morning, a meeting in the afternoon, and then a talk and a lecture in the evening again. And founding this organization, traveling back and forth across America. And so he really, again, was a model of spirituality is no excuse for laziness, for indifference, for mental sloppiness. We were admiring so much the opening slide. I assume you both created that. That said, with our picture and the clock and the calendar. When we looked at that, we both said, what lovely graphics those are. They're so precise, they're so meaningful, and the colors are so well done. And that's what everything we should do should be done with to the highest level that we can. And it just because we want to please God. We want to, if you're cooking a meal, if you're painting a painting, if you're programming a computer, don't think of the task in and of itself, but we're doing it in the highest level that we can to offer it to God. And so laziness or indifference or shoddy thinking, that's just an excuse for not wanting to put out enough energy. And so often when Swami would say, Swami Kriyananda would invite us over for tea. And this didn't happen all the time, but often enough. We'd walk down, and he was hard of hearing, so he didn't often hear us come in. But he would be in his chair, and he would be in bliss. You could tell he just was not there physically. As soon as he saw us, oh, good, you're here. Come and have tea. And how was your day? And what happened today? And what news from Ananda worldwide? But he never, ever was just, oh, well, I'm in bliss. I don't want to hear about all this. So again, he was showing us that balance of being in bliss, but then having your feet on the ground.
Thank you so much, Deviji, especially talking about the screen. Actually, it was designed by Purvi and Jayanti. So it's like many a miracle.
It was beautiful. I know you do computer work, though. Beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. This was really, really inspirational, Jyotish and Devi. And we have so much to learn and seek inspiration from the line of gurus that we are all blessed to be in. So thank you for that. We will move on to our next question. But before I go there, for all the attendees who are dropping in questions, we'll try and make time as much as possible towards the end to accommodate that. So thank you for sending in those. The next one is more related, came from a Guru Bhai, more from a family perspective. And this one says, I love to be on the path of our gurus and the master. However, my family is not as supportive in making this as the central aspect of my life. I have family responsibilities and also love them, so cannot just ignore their preferences. How should I handle this balance? And at Ananda overall, are most couples on this path together? And if not, how have they worked it out?
Okay, well, I'll start with this. First of all, we'll deal with the question of not being supported by your family. Well, every individual has their own karma. And even with people, whether it's a mother, father, child, spouse, they have their own particular karma in any incarnation, in any lifetime. And so we can't force people to follow something that's meaningful. One time, Swami Kriyananda was talking with his brother. He had two brothers, and he was speaking with one of them, this was after he became a disciple of Master, and he was saying, oh, how wonderful, Swami was saying, these teachings are, and maybe you would like to read this book. And his brother just said, frankly, I'm just not interested. And Swami never brought it up again because that wasn't his karma. He was a good man. We met him. But so I think just to accept that just everyone has to follow what's given to them to do in any lifetime. And if they are trying to block you from your spiritual life, then you just have to, have a strategy. Either you say, for this half hour every morning, this is my time, and After that, I'll come out, I'll do all my home responsibilities and do whatever you like, but this time is for me. And then if they begrudge you that, we spoke of Master's second most advanced disciple, his first most advanced disciple, Rajarsi Janakananda. His wife, he was married, and his wife was actually mentally imbalanced. And she would fly into a rage if he tried to meditate. If you can imagine, he would have to go into the bathroom, lock the door, and that's where he would meditate. Master's most advanced disciple. So, you do what you need to do to honor your spiritual calling. And that's what I think. If your family members are at least are willing to compromise, just say, this is my time. And if they're not willing even for that, then you have to find the time elsewhere. I know when I came on the path, my parents weren't happy. It's not, and I moved to Ananda Village Ashram. It's not the life they wanted for me. They wanted me to have a normal life, but that wasn't for me. But after 10 years, and I stayed in touch with them, and I went back and visited them. But after 10 years, my mother finally said to me, she gave me her blessing. She said, because I came from a big family, many cousins and so forth. And she said, you're the only one that didn't live a traditional life, but you're the only one that's happy. And she said, and that was really, she said, everyone else did what was expected, but none of their lives have brought them much happiness, but yours has. So I was so happy she could recognize that. And then the second part, how to be able to fulfill. You want to take on that part? I'm not sure what the second part was. The first part was family that was antithetical, and the second part was.
Second part was that at Ananda are most couples on this.
I did not. Well, it varies. By and large, we are, because by and large, both people, either they meet here, and so they're already on the path, or they both choose to come here. But sometimes it happens that one person, like there's a couple that just moved here, they're retired age, but she's very much committed to the spiritual life. And he's a good man. He's retired, had a career, and he's supportive of her, very supportive. I mean, he made the move to live here, but it's not what he wants to do. He doesn't meditate and so forth. So it varies. But sometimes it brings up conflict. Like once we were counseling a man whose wife was very jealous of the fact that, well, you want to tell that story?
Yeah, so here at Ananda, it takes Ananda Village we're talking about. In order to be a resident, one has to make a lot of choices to get there. And so it's like a naturally filtered system. But our wider congregation, we often have this question arise where one person is much more committed to the spiritual path than the other. Generally speaking, I would say as long as the partner is either supportive or neutral, then let it be. If they're antithetical to your spiritual life, then you have to be firm. But the story Devi was talking about was a man started getting more and more into this path and meditating more. And the wife began to get a little jealous because she saw his enthusiasm for his spiritual life. And I think she felt a little threatened. And one time she came and said, well, do you love God more than you love me? And he had a very good answer. He said, by loving God, I can love you more. And it was a very nice answer. But, there's no sense in confronting, but sometimes you just have to hold firm. Swami Kriyananda was like a rock in a stream. And sometimes people were very frustrated because they wanted to have him go along with their way of thinking. He was just firm in what he knew and what he believed. He didn't necessarily try to tell the stream it should become rock-like, but he wasn't going to um, have the stream push him around. So sometimes you just have to be that way.
What beautiful thoughts. And hopefully, Deviji, as your mother could see through, all the other family members would also probably realize the happiness and joy that one gets by being on this path. So wonderful. Thank you very much for these very inspiring words. The next one's a little more tricky. This is about children, especially teenagers, especially those who are a bit rebellious, which many are at that age. Would you consider those children consider spirituality as not being very fashionable? So how would you get them interested to follow this path? And is it even right to get them interested to follow this path? Or any examples that you could give us?
Well, we're able to talk to this question quite well because our son was extremely rebellious. And he he was born at a Nanda village, grew up at a Nanda village, but it was not his path. And he is a very strong, we have a wonderful relationship. He's very strong individual. And so as a teenager, he had to separate from us, but that created a rebellion in him. Now, he is very, very dharmic, a beautiful soul, but he is not drawn to devotion or to the guru-disciple relationship. But in many ways, his spirituality is deeper than many people living at Ananda village, adults living at Ananda village. He understands on a deep level and lives according to Dharma. He understands karma. He understands right action and what the results are and many of those things. So you can be devotional and not be very dharmic or not be very attuned to fundamental laws. So coming back to the question, be careful about not expecting your children to follow the form of what you do, but try to model to them the essence of your spiritual path. So if your spiritual path, as ours is supposed to produce joy, and you say with your words, oh, meditation makes you joyful, but in your daily life you're grumpy and angry all the time, they don't look at your words, they look at what you model. And so the best teaching is to model, truly model, what your spiritual beliefs are. And that will have an effect on your children, whether they can accept the form of them or not. So if you're kind, if you're serviceful, if you're supportive, if you're centered, honest, nonviolent, all of those things, your children are likely to follow that example while still saying, oh, I have nothing to do with spirituality.
Yeah, in fact, Master even said that people should not necessarily try to draw their children. I mean, if they're interested, fine, but if they're not, he said, then don't push them because it'll build up a resistance. In fact, our son, as an adult, said to us, this was, I don't know, 5 years ago or so, he said to us, you know, at this point in my life, I don't really feel a need for a spiritual path. But if I ever chose one, it would be yours because you never forced it on me. And I thought, well, we did something right there. But he also said one time he was watching us in our relationship with Swami because he met Swami and we were together with him often. And he said, he was, oh, I don't know, maybe 8 years old. He said, "Mommy, why do you always do everything Swami says?" And I said, because we love him, because he's our very, very best friend. And he kind of paused and he said, "I guess I don't love anybody that much yet." And so he was, again, he was trying to understand it. You know, I mean, I don't think he was trying to understand the guru-disciple relationship, but he saw our relationship to a wise guide, and he saw how we honored and obeyed him, and that made a deep impression on him. And so I think for parents, the most important thing you can do, as Jyotish was saying, is the model of your own life. And if it's genuine, if it's sincere, children are very, very perceptive. You know, they can tell if something's false or hypocritical. But if you're really sincere in your practices, and even if they are rebelling, that's okay. Don't get thrown by it. I mean, you don't want them to, you know, do damage to themselves, but, you know, just to hold, and this is what we did with our son when he was rebellious too. We always related to the highest part of him. And eventually that's who he became.
And we always let him know that we loved him. We
Yeah.
didn't always love his behavior,
Right.
but we let him know also that he was different from his behavior, and we loved him in spite of what he might be doing.
These are some real world examples which you would have not really heard of, but very inspiring to know. And a lot of us will be guided by these. The next question is on even smaller children, and I'm sure you could relate to that as well. The question is, I have two children, 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and both of them need a lot of time and attention. But I wish I could spend more time on my sadhana. We know a lot of devotees are actually in this situation. What would your advice be for them?
Shall I start?
Yeah.
Well, our son was born after I had been a serious meditator for 6 years. And I had meditated for hours together, morning and evening. And then our son was born. And for a few years, that was the end of my sadhana. I didn't have the time to do it. And it was hard. But our son was such that whenever I would try to meditate, if it was like 3 a.m, or, oh, I've just put him down for a nap, now I can meditate, he would immediately wake up anytime, day or night. And I at first I thought, is he just being difficult? And then what I really came to understand was the bond between the mother and the child is so strong. He could feel my energy withdrawing from the world, and it scared him. And so he wanted to stop that. And that's what I finally came to understand. But the once a week, many of you know Jaya and Sadhana Devi, Nayaswamis Jyotish. They also had a young child at that same time. And this was 44 years ago. But Sadhana and I would meet, Sadhana Devi and I would meet once a week on an evening, and we would have a 2-hour meditation together. And that was my sadhana for about 2 years. And then it came back. So essentially what I'm saying is there are different dharmas for different stages of your life. I did not lose spiritually by devoting myself to my child during that period. I gained, and I know that. And so don't begrudge the time. If you can, do meditate. But if it's just not possible, then put your whole heart into seeing your children as your divine service, and you won't lose spiritually. And then the time will come around as your child gets older and they understand and you're able to meditate. So just realize that God's coming to you, maybe not through meditation, but through total selfless service as taking care of your child, and be happy about it.
And there are rhythms, you
Yeah.
know, the time will come when your children will be much more independent, and then you'll have more time. Kind of humorously, there was a family here, and they had 5 daughters, and the woman was, of course, extremely uh, taken up. Her time was taken up by raising these 5 daughters. One of the ministers here asked her.
She was applying for
yeah,
Kriya.
she was applying for Kriya, and they asked her about her sadhana, and she paused and then, with a little smile, said, "Do prayers before the meal count?"
So I think anyone who's had children understands it's how demanding it
Yeah.
is. But you know, one final thing, and then I know we have other questions. What did I gain from that? And I'm saying this to all mothers and fathers. What did I gain spiritually from, saying, okay, now I can't meditate, but I'll serve my child? I gained the ability to give myself 100% into whatever I was doing. And then you bring that to meditation, you go a lot deeper.
Thank you, Deviji. We definitely remember the times when our son was born, and we used to meditate while having, one of us would have the kid on our laps. As long as we would meditate, he would just watch us quietly. And once the meditation is over, then he would start crying or something. We used,
Oh, you were lucky.
We had the opposite.
we used to feel as if he is master telling us, come on, keep meditating, keep meditating.
That's very sweet.
You want to take the next question?
Sure. The next question is that I have been on this path for a number of years, and I've been a Kriyaban. I would want to do longer meditation and go for seclusion more often. But with a hectic family life and work life, I'm left with no time to go deeper in my spiritual journey. How does a devotee manage to have time alone? It's more about wanting to go for seclusions. And what has been your experience while observing the other devotees who have been able to balance this aspect as well?
Yeah, that's, of course, everybody's schedule varies. And well, I'll say this: sometimes your schedule is inflexible and you simply cannot make time. But other times you have, I don't know, allowed your schedule to fill up with, as Master called them, unnecessary necessities. And so one thing to do is to look in your life to see whether you really have to be there all the time, every day, or whether there might be some times when you could take even a long weekend, or maybe even a week. And so we often allow circumstances, or allow the world's momentum to control us without taking control over it ourselves.
That's right.
And so one thing to look at is whether you can find those spaces. If you can, then take them. And if you can't, then take little ones. We had a friend who always kept silence from the time she got up until noon. And then on Thursdays, she would keep it all day. So she had a child. And so the child learned that, oh, mommy just doesn't speak until noon. I don't know whether she did that when the child was really young or not, but by the time we knew her, she did. And so she was able to carve out an interiorized space, if not a distanced space. And so I would say, look at what is possible in your life. Don't just assume that I'm so busy that I can't possibly do this, because in many cases you really can. It's a matter of making the decision to do so.
Yeah, in a lot of Master's teachings, he praises the person of initiative. And that's a nice concept, somebody who is able to initiate things in their own life. And, the most people who aren't on a spiritual path, who aren't picking up that discipline, they're just kicked around by circumstances. They're not people of initiative. But as we begin to really be sincere about the spiritual path, you want to start looking, what can I be, how can I develop my life? How can I take control of my life without feeling my life is controlling me? And that's a very important concept. How can I say I am in, or God is in charge of my life, not my boss, not my mother-in-law, not, this nagging colleague, whatever it might be. And so to really say, all right, if I want to take more seclusion, what do I do? Or I want to have some seclusion. And this is what Jyotish and I do. We'll look and we'll say, oh, look, on this Thursday, it's totally free. Okay, we're not going to set up any appointments, and we're going to have an inward day. And we have a lot of demands on our life, so it isn't easy. But you say, I'm going to take advantage of the time God's given me. Maybe you look at your life and say, oh, no one's coming. The children won't be home from school, and my family won't be home till 7 o'clock. I'm going to make dinner in advance, and then I'll have 2 hours all to myself. And I'll meditate and I'll read uplifting books or whatever it might be. And so, but always have that in the back of your mind. Don't wait till, oh, I've got 3 weeks. Just say, look, I've got an hour now. Let me use it wisely. That's why Master said the minutes are more important than the years, because it's the choices we make in each minute.
Thank you, Deviji. Thank you, Jyotishi. Really practical tips. The next few questions are broader beyond family and work, which we have been talking about. And the first one in that is, in life, we often take somewhat life-changing big decisions, such as which job to choose, which college to go to, who to marry, which city to live in, or which hospital or doctor to consult in life-critical illness, and so on. And as you may be aware, in India, many people seek a lot of advice from astrologers or psychics for such help. Is that a good thing? And how can one seek guidance more from the guru and actually get answers in such situations?
Well, there are very often psychics or astrologers are mediocre psychics or astrologers, and their answers are no better than common sense, than your own common sense would give you. But the best answers come from intuition, and that takes calming your mind, uplifting your consciousness in meditation, opening your heart and being very calm and neutral, and then asking the divine to guide you in this. And the more neutral, the more detached from whatever answer, the more likely you're able to get intuition. There's a whole book on intuition that is published there by Ananda Sangha. And if people are interested, but intuition is the best guide. Other than that, I would consult a wise friend and trust their advice, a deep meditator. I would trust their advice ahead of most astrologers. Once in a while, you get one that's very good, and then but that means that astrologer or reader or seer is working with intuition.
Yeah, I'll just give a couple of practical things. This book, Intuition for Starters, I actually put the book together. I didn't write it, but it's from Swami Kriyananda's talks on the subject of intuition. And there's some very helpful ideas, but a couple of things. One, he said, if you're not sure, if, shall I do A or B? He said, hold it up to the spiritual eye, project that out and ask for an answer. And then try to feel intuitively in your heart. Now, it's an art to do this, and it develops over time. He said, if you're not sure, then hold option A and option B up to God. And he said, look for a sense of calmness and clarity, not excitement and oh yeah, this is what I should do, but just when you've hit upon what really is the highest God's will for you, there should be a sense of clarity and calmness. But it's hard to know. I mean, this is something we struggle with all the time. God, what's the right thing to do? What shall I say to this person? How do we do, because life is limitless possibilities. And so if you're not sure, take your best guess. Say, okay, I don't know if it's A or B. They both feel equal. I'll start with A but don't just like close all the doors. Just take one step. How does it feel? Does it still feel okay? Take the next step, the next step. And so you test it. And then little by little, we could watch Swamiji. He was so clear and good at this that he would, we'd say, Swami, what should we do? He'd pause for a minute and he said, no, I think this is the right way. And he would always be right, but he developed that over time. So and yes, you can go to psychics and astrologers, but then you're not developing your own intuition. You're not listening to God, which is most important.
How wonderful these tips are. And as Jyotishji, you mentioned, talking to another person who's been meditating, I think it's a blessing for all of us to have Guru Bhais around, to talk to each other and, really, really learn from the intuition that all of us and the energy that all of us feel in totality. So it's really beautiful to be, in that sense, also being in that community.
Right.
Just doing a quick time check. I'll try and put one last question, if that's all right.
Okay, we'll do a quick answer.
Thank you. This one's from Swamiji's. So can you provide us some example from Swamiji's life on instances where he would have managed difficult outwardly situations? We know about the court cases, we know about the fire at Ananda, and how did he manage it through dharma and spiritual principles? What are the key principles of living in attunement while dealing with these worldly difficult situations?
Well, first of all, he was always solution oriented. One time, in the very early years of Ananda, he was threatened with someone because this man claimed that he was behind in payments, and he was threatening to take away the land of Ananda, and it was quite a large bill that was due. And Swami was got very strong in himself. And a couple of his friends said, oh, come on, Swami, let's have some tea and
You'll feel better.
Yeah, you'll feel better. He said, I don't want to feel better. I want a solution. And so he got very centered and very strong when something was needed. And with his will, he was able to go toward a solution. A second thing is he always found a way to look at something so that he saw the positive aspects of it rather than the problems. He said, problems are endless. Don't look at the problems. Don't analyze. Don't bring your mind into the problems. Bring your mind into the solutions. And so you have to keep your energy positive, your mind focused and strong, and then look for solutions and don't bother with the other parts of it.
And I'll just briefly share a little story of how Swami helped me in this way. It was the first year or two that I was living at Ananda, and I had gotten in a mood. I was discouraged. I was disappointed about some things, the way they had gone. And there was a person who was supposed to bring Swami his mail every day. And somehow that person had to go away. And they said, can you bring him his mail this afternoon? So I was honored to do so, very happy. But they said, he's in silence, he's writing his book, so don't talk to him. I said, okay, I won't, I'll just bring the mail and leave. But I was in a very self-involved, depressed state, and so I went in, I put the mail down. Swami looked up, he saw me, could see exactly what was going on. I didn't say a word, but he went like this. He was writing a book. He was always writing a book, and he was in silence. He was typing on his typewriter. This was before computers, if you can conceive of such a time. And he looked at me. God bless him, he took the page out of the typewriter that he was working on. He put in a little piece of notepaper and he typed in something. He handed it to me, and then he went back to work, and I knew it was time for me to go. But what did he type on that little piece of paper? It was a line, something that Christ said in the Bible. He said, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. And that's really the solution. No matter how hard it gets, you keep seeking God, and then let God make the situation work. But that was really a remarkable moment in my life. It was a turning point.
Thank you so much, Devji, for that answer, and Jyotishji. And actually, thanks a lot for this wonderful session. Real practical tips, experiences, real world experiences from your own lives, and remembrances of the experiences from our line of masters and gurus. We all Guru Bhais are blessed to have you, and all the Guru Bhais, thanks to you as well for being behind this program, doing all different parts, and many hands make a miracle. So thank you very much once again, Jyotishi and Deviji. And thank you everyone for joining
It's
me.
been wonderful to
Yeah,
share
our
with you.
joy, our joy.
Thank you
And
for
I
having
think
us.
people know we are doing these satsangs monthly, so we'll see you all in another month.
Looking forward
Looking
for
forward.
that.
Thank you once again. Thank you, everyone.
God bless you all.
Thank you.